Hey, good morning and welcome to the AudIT and CloudRadial selling webinar. I'm Jeff Farris, the President and CEO of CloudRadial, and I've got with me today Frank Benedetto with AudIT. Frank, we're fortunate to have Frank with us today. Of course, we're fortunate to have me here, of course, but for a webinar focused on selling, there's going to be few people that know more about selling in that cycle than Frank, as an MSP himself, who's done very well as the founder of AudIT, which has transformed the sales relationships for hundreds and hundreds of MSPs. Frank has been on the front lines of helping MSPs, especially himself, to transform prospects into clients. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about kind of the approach of using data and using a solid foundation to kind of get past that trust objections that are there with a lot of clients. We're going to again, if there's a lot of information here we'll go through. We'll be taking questions throughout this. Oops, we've got again information here at the end for people that want to explore our various solutions. But the bottom line here is, at the end of the day, whether you become an AudIT customer or a CloudRadial customer, we just think there's a lot to be done in the sales cycle. And I'd like to turn it over to Frank, and we can talk, let him kind of kick us off on a better way to launch that sales cycle.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for having me here, Jeff. It's always a pleasure to talk to people that are in our little slice of this MSP vendor industry. I think if you go back maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there really wasn't anything in this space, right? There was proposal tools and the vendors, right? Here's our product and use whatever you use to quote it. And I think there was a lot of assumptions out there that MSPs knew how to sell and sell well. And I think, sales is hard. It's hard for any industry, I think. Certain industries, I think, maybe have it a little bit easier. I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking, if you go to a doctor, you're not really there to be sold on something, right? You go, you have a problem and you probably take the advice, right? Because you already have that relationship. But something like technology, it's extra hard. I think a lot of my brethren in this industry are technical in nature. We're not salesy first. And we have that extra burden of trying to explain things that are complex to the end users who, one, don't really want that level of education, right? Like our customers don't really want to have a PhD in technology. And yet we have to make it easy for them to make a good buying decision. Otherwise, we're not doing our job as MSPs. And a lot of the vendors that are out there sell channel only, which means those customers can't get their hands on the product or services unless we, as MSPs, can do a good job at making that sale, right? So therein kind of lies the problem. And the real driving force for me to create AudIT, and as you mentioned, it's a little self-serving, of course, because I have an MSP called Two River Technology Group in New Jersey. But really what this was about for me was, I'd go into a prospect and I would look around and I'd be doing the assessment. And many times they are working with another MSP at that point. And I would say, I can't believe this is what I'm finding. It's like a mess. And I just, I kind of zoom back for a second. I question, I say, why is it a mess? Is it because there's no good products and services to sell? No, of course not, right? There's tons of that. So what's the issue? The issue is that the customer wasn't given an opportunity to make good buying decisions for one reason or another. They didn't buy that stuff, right? They may have been pitched. They might have said no, maybe they didn't understand it, but it's kind of a mess. And then I would go in there and explain it a different way. And that was where the audit report kind of came in. And I'd get them to buy from me. And sometimes the departing MSP would say to me, I told them to buy that. They wouldn't buy it from me. I don't know why or how they bought it from you. And like, it kind of validated my thinking here. And it's saying like, listen, at the end of the day, like, I like working in my little slice of New Jersey, right? But there's a whole world of opportunity out there, even within my own area. And I just want to see the quality of IT be elevated for those end customers, right? Because they're the ones that suffer. They're the ones that get the ransomware. They're the ones we read about, on the news. And my feeling was if there was a tool or a better way to sell and present for the MSP that allowed that end customer to make a good buying decision, they would benefit. We would benefit as MSPs as we'd be successful, and the vendors would love us because the vendors are moving their products and they keep making good stuff. So that's really where this whole thing had started, and why I kind of got hyper interested in the sales aspect of what MSPs could do. So,
Frank, interrupt here, but
yeah.
the thing that fascinates me is when you are out there talking to clients, there's so much in your head as an MSP. I mean, all the technology, all of the different opportunities to go back and make that client better. But you're talking to somebody that's a lawyer or dealing in real estate or dealing in medical, and their head's not where your head's at, right?
Yeah.
And so there has to be this transfer of knowledge, not in a way that you understand it, but in the way that the client understands it. Right. And one of the things that's always impressed me about audit was the ability to organize that information and get it on a piece of paper where a client or potential client can consume it. And, it strikes me, and I'd be curious about, like, as you developed audit, how did you arrive at that report format to get that stuff organized from your head to a point where, the client can understand it?
Yeah, cool question. We like to call that the curse of knowledge, right? Like as technicians, we know so much, and it seems we come at it from a different perspective. Like when we're looking at the sale, but we oftentimes forget that our customer we're talking to has no idea or will never have that amount of knowledge to us. So you are kind of cursed with it. So you need to force yourself to make this thing simple. So the interesting thing with audit was I didn't start out with a system, and I didn't really think I was going to sell this to to other MSPs. I started out as really coming up with a report format for myself, for like how I would present the data, right? And one thing I think we can all agree upon was that over the last 10 to 15 years, the complexity and the amount of things that you would assess has grown exponentially. So in the beginning, it was much easier when everybody had like a small business server in one location and everything was kind of in a closed network. You can kind of scan that network, pretty much find the things you needed, and go in there. It was a lot easier, I think, to come in with like an all you can eat fixed fee per user and have it include everything, and away you went. Now there's so many other things, and as time went on, I started to find that half of them didn't have networks, and there were cloud services, and there were all these other things that I needed to kind of harness together. So my report got more and more complex, and I used to hate. I hated doing assessments. So we use it as a marketing opportunity. Hey, let us come in and do an assessment. And the prospect would raise their hand, and I would go in and I go, oh, this is going to take me forever, right? So I gather up the data. And again, the data, look, everybody does it a different way, whether it's automated or all manual or somewhere in between. That's not really the issue here. The issue is, as a technician now, how do I present this to the customer? So for me, I said, number one, it has to be simple to understand. Two, it has to be emotional, right? I have to be able to have somebody go, holy crap, and lean forward and actually want to know more, right? No one ever did that in the past. Like I'd have this big report, and they'd lean back in their chair like, oh my God, it's going to take forever. So I had to be able to do the math for them. I had to make it easy to score it, right? So I had to have them be able to see this, have an emotional response, see exactly where they were today and want to know more. And then I had to be able to show them what would success look like if you work with Two River Technology Group. What's it going to look like, right? It's not just a proposal with a bunch of vaporware, but let me show you what it would look like if we're doing this meeting in 6 months and we're doing another assessment. What will that look like for you, right? And it has to, so it was kind of like current state, future state kind of mentality here. And the gap between those two states was really the value of what I was selling. And what I started to do is I had created sort of that prototype report initially, and then I was using like vendor collateral instead of our own infographics. And I started to get the response. The customers would say, "Oh, so what's the red boxes?" Or like they'd ask me, like they wanted to know more. And I had their attention, and they're like, "Oh, it's so much easier to understand than some of the other reports." And so I knew I was on the right path there. And that's kind of how we formalized. But in the end, we built the audit report first. Then I had to go to some developers and say, we need to create a system that generates this report. Right. I think if we did the opposite, we'd still be fighting over what the report would look like, right?
Can you show, Frank, can you share a sample report? Because one of the things that, again, that I think is solid, and it's a theme that we hit on all the time at CloudRadial, is don't lead with trust in the sales cycle, right? Again, when you walk in there against 3 other MSPs, it's going to come down to like, trust me because I'm a nicer guy, or I've been in business longer, or I've got a better staff. And how's a client supposed to evaluate niceness and intelligence and sincerity, right? A client can't. They need something tangible to understand what an MSP can really bring to the table. And the audit report seems to me that it gets that trust off the table. So
yeah, it was also about the presentation of it. I think that I wanted to give myself the best opportunity that I could to have a really good first impression when I sat down. I mean, I'm asking companies to hand me thousands of dollars every month and have trust in me with their data. I want to make sure this report looks like I can deliver that, right? So I wanted it to be professional. We bind ours, we spent a couple $100 on a binding machine, nice covers and stuff. So we go in there and I make a couple copies for people instead of the old staples and things. Again, all these little things, matter. But this is the sample report here. We wanted to have the ability to have logos on there, right? So now what we do is we put actually, instead of our this is not my company, Bulldog, but we put the client's logo on here because they like to see their stuff. It's all about them, right? This is the story about them. They're the hero of the story. I'm just the guide, right? This isn't my story, it's theirs. So we put our logo small at the bottom there. We want to have brandability, but we want it to be all about them. So nice cover, logos, their names on it. Again, I want to set myself apart from anybody else who might come in that might be cheaper, but I want them to feel like if they're spending more out of the gate, we're gonna, we're at least starting out on the right foot. We tell them what we're gonna tell them, right? What was important to me as well is that I recognize that not everybody makes that immediate decision to buy right there. Sometimes they have to go back to a business partner. Sometimes you're pitching to the office manager and they need to go back to the decision maker if they're not in the room. I wanted this to be able to stand on its own. So after we did our presentation, I give them the audit report, right? And I know some people, they've questioned that tactic. Like, why would you give it to them? They could give it to the other MSP or the incumbent, Well, this is not the recipe, right? This is not the proposal with line item by line item of what it is, right? This is merely me saying, hey, here's where I believe you are in a current state. Here's where I can take you to in a future state. And this is what it'll cost you, right? I don't expose anything else. So I think that's something of real value. And going back to your point, a lot of time that end customer has all that spaghetti in their head. They just know there's problems. I wanted to be able to listen to them and come back and say, hey, I made sense of your spaghetti and let me show you what this looks like. And here it is. And this is what we call a summary impact page. And this is kind of like everything they've told me, everything that I've assessed, all boil down into one simple, neat initial presentation page. And this is where they lean forward, right? Because now they want to know more. I'll pause. I want to talk the whole time, but if you have questions about, maybe my tactics thus far.
No, this is awesome, and we're gonna. There's a question about our integration, and I'll work in a few minutes. We'll get into CloudRadial and what that looks like,
Yep.
because I think there's this two-phase approach, right? Again, I just can't emphasize enough in a competitive MSP environment. What you want to be able to do is get past that trust factor or make that not an option, right? So again, as we work with our banks, we still expect them and we still expect them to send us statements that we can verify what's happened. Our cell phone bills, we expect a statement. We expect to see what the charges were. We expect to see what they're doing and if they're actually providing the service. We don't trust anybody from a vendor relationship. And, prior to CloudRadial and AudIT, for the most part, you walk in with a Word document that at the end of the day is about the MSP, but not about the client.
Right.
And what AudIT does is kind of turn that around to make it all about the client. And the MSP is going to be the way that the client gets to where they want to be. We're calling that, basically the outcome driven MSP, right? Because again, you focus on the outcome, not necessarily the labor to get there. And so, in this case, with AudIT, the outcome is you're trying to get all of that green. The mystery of how that turns green, that's the client can be involved in that or not involved in that, but that they probably aren't going to want to be. They just want the outcome.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, every single client of ours just wants things to work, right? That's when you're delivering the service side of this, they don't really question the vendor that we're using, right? I mean, for the most part, they don't know the names unless, if it's on the news, good or bad, maybe they know a vendor name. But for the most part, that's for us as the MSPs. However, most MSPs go in there with all the vendor collateral, right? Talking about speeds and feeds and talking, naming vendors as though, unless it's Microsoft, they probably don't even know who the rest of those vendors, that vendor stack is, right? It's not important to them. What's important is that they feel like confident that things look good. And we use the doctor example, right? If I was your doctor and said, hey, your physical results came back, come on and let's review. And you saw this, right? You'd be breaking out in a sweat right now because you see red and yellow, you see the score is 19 and green is 100 and that there are issues, right? So, obviously there's a level of trust you start with your doctor or with your, proposed MSP, but this makes it easy to understand. And then we kind of get, deeper into the conversation. The other thing we talked about making it simple was, it's important that we're not giving them the ability to take our word for it. But again, in a sales situation, we have to make it easy for them to make a decision, right? If we make it hard, they're going to go somewhere else, right? The brain just turns off and says, this is too complicated. I can't decide. It's too much money. I'll delay the decision. I'll go somewhere else. I had to make it easy. And what does not make it easy is when you take 30 pages of data that you as the technician have gathered, right, to make that you need as an MSP to be able to advise them. It doesn't make it easy for them if you give them all that data and say, here, we'll look for yourself, right? And we'll do this, 27 times, we'd be there for 3 weeks trying to prove to them. Again, we want to make it easy. So we latched on to these summary statements. Let's roll this up, right? People, are good at going on Twitter and saying what they want to say in a succinct, sentence, right? I forget how many characters you're limited to now, but imagine if Twitter was unlimited, we'd be tweeting these like voluminous pages. People wouldn't read it. It wouldn't have that same effect, would it? But when you have a quick little tweet, you read that thing in, 10 seconds and you understand what the essence of the message is. So I wanted to do the same thing here. It doesn't mean, hey, there's not a pile of data that's behind it that verifies it. And, one thing I like about CloudRadial is that you provide the means on an ongoing basis to prove that we are doing the things we said we were going to do here, right? So it's not only hey, I made the sale, but now we get to back that up with some substance that we can show the client on a regular basis. Hey, if you go into the portal, we can see that that things are still good, that the gauges are still green. But initially, you don't have that ability, right? Like you don't have the ability usually to deploy your kit into a prospect's environment, right, and get to them to that point where you could prove it out. In the beginning, you have to be able to make the sale, and you have to do it on trust and some presentation of your data in a simplified fashion.
Yeah, you hit on a couple of themes there that are real sticking points for me. And I just think just because they stick in my craw. And one is the what I call the NASCAR page. And again, I've seen a lot of websites sites like this, but it's the NASCAR page of partners. Like, here's all of our partners, right? And so, the MSPs got, we use Sophos, we use whatever, right, on down the list. And what's interesting is what they attempt to do there is to use inherited authority, right? So Sophos is a well-known and well-respected brand. We use Sophos, therefore we inherit Sophos authority, and you can trust us because we're a Sophos partner, right? Which is fine when you go to these shows and you talk to the Sophos people, and everybody around the Sophos booth knows Sophos. As soon as you get in front of that dentist, he doesn't know Sophos. Exactly. And there's no authority to inherit because Sophos doesn't have any authority to dentist. Now, if you walked in as Henry Schein Dental Software, you might have some inherited authority. But when you walk in with Sophos into a dentist office, you get no authority. And so, I had this personal conviction that the mess in the pre-sales process is created by all of the sales enablement tools that Sophos and all these other providers provide out there, because again, Sophos is really good. All you got to do is walk in with a Sophos brochure and you're going to close the deal when that doesn't work, right? Because again, the fundamental problem is there's no inherited authority. Maybe there is with Microsoft, maybe there is with Dell. Because that's a brand the consumer might actually understand. But when we get into technical things, I just came back from a conference and there was, 15 different security vendors there. I can't even keep them straight, and this is part of my job, is to understand what the ecosystem is. I can't tell you whether one's better than the other because the market's in such dynamic flux, but I know that there's no way I can take that authority and transfer it to a client. And so, and then the other piece again is like this is where it keeps coming back, and I'll show CloudRadial here in a second. But the thing that was fascinating to me is the ideas again. It goes back to AudIT. I kind of want to end on this a little bit. Is that with AudIT, you have made it about the client, right? It's 100% about the client. It's 100% about what they need. It's not about the MSP. It's not the fact that the MSP is a Sophos expert or a Huntress expert or a ID agent expert, which is fine. Those are all good skills, but the client doesn't care, right? They're looking for the outcome. They're looking for green instead of red. And the fact that you've made this report that an MSP is invested in that client, made this about the client, put this in terms where they can understand it, is that first step to building, that really effective relationship.
Yeah, 100%. I never heard it called the NASCAR screen, but it makes total sense where it's scrolling by. And, you often do see that on the MSP's website. And that's a clear indication that, the MSP, it's about them, right? They're telling their story. They're showing all their partners, and we try to do it a little differently on our website. Like, again, we recognize our customer is that hero, and they get to the page. We want them to feel like they are the customer and that it's about them. And we're just simply the guide here. And this report is an extension of that. So if you do say, hey, and our one call to action is schedule an assessment, like that's the call to action. We don't have 40 other calls, right? So we come in and do the assessment. This is an extension of the feeling of where they start, is that it is about them. I wanted to flip real quick to the end here, because this is kind of where we make our sale. And where we say, okay, we've kind of brought you through where you are today, where you could be. here's what it looks like. Let's summarize this. And this is our summary page that we kind of do our selling from. It makes it easy for them to see. And look, we don't close 100% of our deals. But what I do find is that even if they don't say yes to us, they always comment, "Hey, this was like the best presentation that anybody's ever done." In for us, right? We made it really easy for us to understand it, and perhaps they decided that they weren't going to, buy right then and there. Maybe it's a cost issue, or maybe there's some other things in the way. But we've had people come back to us. They remember our presentation. I know that, unless we're going head to head with somebody else who used audit specifically, the format is going to be way different, right? And so we maintain that competitive advantage, but make it easy for them to understand. And one last point I'll make about this is we do not give them the proposal to take with them, right? So many MSPs make that mistake where they have all that confusing collateral that you mentioned that the vendors give you. And where do we wind up doing our presentation from? The proposal, right? Or flipping through line item by line item. And, when you buy the car, like that's that emotional purchase. You smell the leather, you drive it. You're not thinking clearly in them. And, the sales guy knows that too, right? You're buying on emotion and what you really want. He's not going to bring you in now and kill all that by showing you the parts list and that you're paying 98 cents for a spark plug and $400 for the seatbelt, right? And that's what we do as MSPs. We go through all those line items, and we do try to have an inherent authority that these vendor names mean something what they don't. What I do is I just tell them, say, hey, here's the price. It's $2,500 a month, right? And that's the end of it, right? There's not a lot of that we can change. If they say, is there any way we can do this for less money? I say, yeah. And I might go back to, earlier in the presentation and say, which one of these do you want to turn red or back to red or yellow? If we take out managed DNS, or if we don't, you want to get rid of the firewall. Well, no, I definitely don't want to do that. I'll get rid of, endpoint encryption. No, we need that. Okay. Well, now you're understanding why, it's $2,500 unless you start getting rid of things. So only time I pull a proposal out is when they're ready to sign. And all that's going to show is that the total at the bottom matches what we have here as $2,500. And we make a lot of sales that way. And, that's what makes me feel good, is that I allowed that customer to make a good educated buy-in decision. Even if they said no, I never feel like, man, I should have explained it a different way. That used to happen to me all the time. Or what I would do is, out of guilt, I would lower my price until they said yes, because I really wanted them to get what I had.
Right.
And so, and that's like the kiss of death. You can't scale your MSP. As you grow, one day you wake up and say, well, it was great for my customers. I'm doing a really good job, but I can't run my business or make a profit. And so that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. So let me segue here, because everything you said is teed up perfectly what we're going to talk about with CloudRadial.
Sure.
And see if I can.
I'll stop my share.
Yeah, see if I can actually manage this. All right. So, for people that don't know, CloudRadial, what we're doing is focusing on all the client engagement and touch points. So again, everything that an MSP does with the client, whether that be reporting or ticketing or Office 365 or QBRs, all of that stuff is going to be fed through the CloudRadial portal. But we're doing this to be the MSP portal, so everything's white labeled and branded around that. We've already gone way past that. Let me see. So let's go. All right. So we should have the CloudRadial screen on the part. So we talked about inherited authority, and one of the things that kind of follows up is you inherit authority because you're insecure, right? I think. And so, and I'll go back to when I was very young and just out of college and in the adult world, which is kind of a big transition. At least it was for me, becoming the kid in college to the adult in the room, talking to other people like my dad, right? Around the business table. I felt very insecure, And so one of the first things I did was I bought a nice watch. Like that nice watch would make me look like a grown up. And if people would think that I looked like a grown up, then they would not, they wouldn't notice the fact that I was only 23 years old and it didn't look like the rest of them around the table, right? So I used this inherited authority from a nice watch manufacturer to basically pretend I was an adult in the adult world. So, if you look at that process that MSPs go through, the first part of that is, again, you lack confidence. You know the value you bring because you've got it in your head, but you lack confidence because you don't know how to explain it, right? And so, and again, the problem is with when you start your MSP, you start off with Microsoft Word and you start up with a prospect, and somehow you're supposed to figure out like how to make Microsoft Word and whatever you type into Microsoft Word, get that prospect, right? And so the first thing that fills that up is the Sophos brochures and all the other stuff. And you go like, oh, this will give me confidence. This will make people think I'm an MSP, right? And really what happens is as you mature, you start developing a better sense of yourself and what you deliver and how you deliver that. And what you've done, Frank, is really clear is you kind of packaged up that adulthood in a sense into a report that gets them on the right track, right? It turns out the watch didn't make me any better or smarter as a 23-year-old, not really helping me much now, but it is that idea of like understanding the value that you bring to a client, understanding why the client really needs you, right? You walk in the equation as the first customers, as you said, just believe in me, just somebody believe in me and give me money and I'll be so happy, right? Then eventually that turns around and you understand your value, and then you're going to get in a situation where that client just doesn't understand us. I don't want them, right? That's a big mental shift. And part of that comes in knowing what you sell to the client and knowing the value that you bring. Part of this then, and this is kind of where this is headed, when it comes into the pre-sales approach, then it also comes into the way you engage with that client, right? So again, what you've done with the audit report is you've set the stage that we're a different sort of MSP. We're a client first MSP. We're going to dig in and understand your issues and create something that directly addresses your need. We're not going to sell you. We haven't even talked about what we're going to sell you and fulfill it on the back end. We've just talked about the outcomes. So now with CloudRadial, what we're doing, and this is what you're seeing here on the screen, is what a typical user would see in the company. Or the first four items on the left would be the user items. These other items would be the people that pay the bills, right, in the reporting. So we're going to pull together basically if you, and this is important, just as important in the pre-sales as it is in the post-sales, because a lot of people think that CloudRadial is a post-sales tool. So I get the client, then I set them up in CloudRadial, and now we're good to go. What we're finding, and we've now got like a lot of stories of partners coming back and going like, I showed them CloudRadial, they love it, they want to use it, I've sold them, now I've got to go deliver it, right? Because CloudRadial turns, just like the AudIT audit report does, it turns what an MSP does into something that's visualizable and client relevant, right? So again, instead of just like, hey, we're going to take care of you, you trust us, now we're going to go back and go like, don't trust us, don't trust anything we're going to do. We even in the audit side, we show you all this red and yellow, and we're going to rerun that report, on a regular basis to show you that we turned it green and we're keeping it green, because that's how we're going to develop trust. Don't trust us. Just make us prove to you that we've changed the color of these boxes and we've solved these problems. The other piece comes in the CloudRadial, which is, again, we're trying to get all of that stuff around the client, around the MSP brand, right? So again, what you're seeing here is a portal that includes the Office 365 stuff, the ticketing stuff. So again, if usually it starts off with like, hey, what can I see my tickets? Can I engage with tickets? Do you guys have to use email? When I go to request service or report problems, can stuff be customizable? How easy it's to order? Can I do, can I create a portal for a client that shows them exactly what they need for their business, right? Again, the portal's designed and it's all customizable around the particular client or even down to the user level. So again, what you're doing is you're customizing the experience for them the same way that Amazon shows you, customizes it around your experience. They sell 1 million items, but you usually don't see 1 million irrelevant items when you go to Amazon. You see the stuff that you're kind of interested in because they're smart enough to adapt for you. So as we get in here and we pull this stuff together, we're going to start pulling in, we can pull in the endpoint information. We can show them whether those machines are Windows 11 ready. We can show the warranty information. We can summarize a lot of the stuff through automation, because a lot of stuff where we can kind of do things that behind the scenes to do the low hanging fruit, again, is we can show that transparency of operation. We can show the transparency of asset management. We can show what MSPs are doing for things. We can put it all together in nice charts and graphs, because again, it needs to be consumable by the end users and the clients. So again, if we want to talk about different OSs, getting people consistent on software, we've got that all baked in. And we've also got the ability to, even though today we don't have a direct integration between AudIT and CloudRadial, we have what's called these report archives, where basically anything you generate. So, the typical scenario is I go in, I show the audit report, and then the client's expected to keep it in a desk drawer to compare it with the next one that's brought out, right? And they're not going to do that. So what you can do very easily is just feed these reports into the report archives, bring those things in, and then just have those ready to show to the client whenever you want, right? So whatever reporting you do, whether it be from audit or really any source, can feed into CloudRadial. Now, where this gets really, really interesting on the sales side is you take audit to show kind of their current state, and which is where they're at and where they need to be. Then you take something like CloudRadial, where you're basically showing them the way it's going to be like to work with that MSP, right? So now you're showing them in that pre-sale stuff, and this is what I really am now so excited about with CloudRadial, is that it's a great pre-sales tool when it's presented in a sense of this is what it's going to be like, right? Because again, we've got training built in here. So again, users are going to be able to get trained up on Office 365 or core things. They're going to get the reporting. They're going to get the knowledge base of stuff. They're going to get the ticketing pieces. All of that stuff is going to be consolidated into one portal around the MSP's brand, right? And we don't need authority from Sophos or any of the other vendors out there. I'm picking on Sophos, but I love them, but I just pick on them because they're really good at sales enablement. But as you get down to it, what's really nice is, again, what you're showing the clients is stuff about them. It's about their business, but you're showing them a product that defines you as a business, right? Because again, you're transparent, you're open. You're not going to keep them in the dark or confuse them with buzzwords. We're going to show them information that's relevant. We're going to show them tools like knowledge base and training that the users can do for themselves that make things more collaborative, right? So again, when an MSP walks in and says, look, here's where you're at, Mr. Client. Here's where we can take you. Here's the outcome we want to drive towards. And then they can show the portal. It's like, in working with us, here's how we're going to keep you up to date to show you the progress we're making. Here's how we're going to keep you in the loop about making critical business decisions about that affect productivity and collaboration, decision making, the things that you really thought you started your business to get, right? Now all of a sudden what you've got is a winning package when you go in to make that sales pitch to a client, because it's all about them, it's all about their experience. And all of the confusing things about Sophos, Huntress, firewalls, all of that stuff, it's just transparent, right? It's just either transparent or it goes away. And then what happens, especially powerful, I think when you combine audit and CloudRadial, is when you get into the planner functions where you're starting to do a roadmap for what things look like forward, right? So Mr. Client, we've still got this big patch of red. Let's create a product around it. Let's figure out like what we need to do to address that. Let's get that information up there, right? Let's plan it out. And let's go address that in Q4, right? All of a sudden now you can take the data that you're generating from audit, from all these other integrations with CloudRadial, pull that all together and then make it actionable and turn that into a project, or even better, turn it into another source of managed recurring revenue. So again, the power of presentation, the power of making it about the client, to make it about client first, to emphasize outcomes, is an extremely powerful sales technique, and much better, in my humble opinion, and I think Frank's as well, than anything that Sophos will give you. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Let me know when you get the cease and desist from Sophos, but your points are really well taken.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, maybe. So we're kind of to at least the CAN presentation. Ricky's been kind enough to manage the questions on the back end. Anything come up that we should address, or any topics that people are asking about?
I think there's a lot of questions in general that I've heard, and obviously the one that Gary was asking earlier about the integration and speak systems and stuff. Can you talk about like how you kind of foresee a lot of these different pieces fitting together? Because I think a lot of people, when they think about, the buzzword for a lot of people is integration, which is rightfully so. They want an automated experience, but I kind of talk to these people and I think, like, what does that really mean? Is there a need for a like API integration? Is it a process integration? Like, any thoughts on how this all kind of comes together? Is there a kind of a cohesive thing we should be looking for with all these different tools?
You want to take that first, Frank? Because
Yeah, I'm going to put my MSP hat on for a second, because it's easier for me to answer from that perspective. So the challenge that I've always had, and I continue to have, is how much of my toolkit can I deploy into an environment to get all that extra data to be able to present back to them, right? So whether it's a CloudRadial agent or an RMM agent, or like you said, Huntress, there's a lot of agent-based data gathering tools that we use once they become the client, right? But what do I do when I go in there? And I always tell the client, listen, this isn't going to be a 462 point audit, right? It's a 27 point audit, right? There's only so much that I could do, even if I'm charging you unless you let me deploy my entire kit in here, right? And 95% of the time, they're not going to let you do that, right? They don't want to give you administrative rights. They want you to be able to look through using your MSP lens and your experience, and come back to them and tell them what they should do, right? And so there's a couple sales and levels here. Sale number one is getting the client in the beginning, right? Which I would argue is the hardest thing, right? It's so much easier to upsell and cross-sell to existing customers, right? But you made a really great point. Part of showing them what success looks like if they're working with Two River Tech are the things that we're going to be providing. And CloudRadial is one of those experiences right on the back end that says, hey, this isn't just some tool that's cool for me. This is what your experience, Mr. Customer, is going to look like, right? Can you do that right now? No, we don't do that at all, right? Like we don't have a portal. We don't have training or knowledge-based information, right? So I think AudIT is a great tool that you use before you can deploy most of your kit to show them what it would look like, including the CloudRadial experience, right? Once you get that customer now, then you start deploying your kit. That's where I think CloudRadial is one of those tools that makes a big impact, because if you're Sophos, right, if Sophos is doing its job, the customer doesn't even know, right? It's transparent. That's like vaporware to them. Now, we as MSPs know, wow, it's so critical. And the layer of security there, and at the firewall gateway and all this other stuff, that's what gets us, geeks really excited. But that end customer, they don't touch or feel that. What they touch or feel is something like that CloudRadial client portal experience, right? So I think when we started talking, right, I think sometimes it's funny when other people think you're competitors, right? And then we started talking, we don't really compete at all. Like, this is a great complementary type solution. So I think, we were teasing some integration in the future, maybe be able to pass the data back and forth, or maybe pass data to us as like that presentation layer to go out and to use in say business reviews. But I think this is great in the beginning to maybe get that customer. And then we're talking about the second sale, of course, is your upsells and cross sells, right? You get a new product, you say, hey, we added Rocket Cyber to our stack, right? And we would like to explain that to you, right? How would we do that? We need a good way to be able to present to the customer, say yes, right? They don't care so much about our management tools on the back end. It makes our life easier and the ability to deliver our service, but we need to be able to show them in a convincing way that you really need to use this. And if they don't, the first go around, which is what I used to find, is next time I wouldn't even mention it again. Oh, you told me you didn't want that, right? Until there's a problem. And then I have the solution and then they buy it. And it always feels like I always have an answer, right? I want to keep it on the radar, and that report allows us to do that. So integration for us would probably, initially look like what you talked about, which is, hey, put the audit report up there. Potentially down the line, the ability to pass data back and forth and do it and present it within an audit report infrastructure, and then have it flow back up to you for the management side of things.
Yeah, so I just add to that too, from an integration perspective, there's the MSP's view of integration, which almost always results in labor savings, right? And so if I can integrate stuff better, then maybe I spend one less minute. So if we're integrated with audit, for example, I don't have to drag and drop that report into the report archive. That may still be the home for it. That may still be the appropriate place for it, but I don't have to drag and drop it if it's automated. So that saves a little bit of time, and that's all good. Integrations are good because that helps. Integrations are automations, right? And so anything that automates and integrates saves time and makes the MSP's job not only easier, but also makes it work more consistently, right? So you don't have to worry who's in the office or who's got a cold that day. Things are still continue to run if they're integrated and automated. So that's from an MSP side. From a client side, bringing that stuff into a single portal is really the core piece. So again, it doesn't really matter, like the report archive for us seems like it's not integrated, but it doesn't seem that way to the client. The fact that they're dealing with the MSP's branded portal and the reports are there in their portal, and the fact that it's really just 3 clicks to get to it and to view that information makes it integrated, right? At least from a client perspective. I mean, and you look at, from an example an MSP might understand, which is the Ingram as a distributor. They're a large distributor, but you've got the portal for ordering, you've got a portal for managing the CSP, you got a portal for managing their cloud stuff, for ordering hardware. I mean, it just seems like Ingram, even though they're a huge business, is sort of glued together as a collection of parts presented back to the end user. And you compare that with like a PAX8 where it's all in one portal, it seems more integrated. Now, behind the scenes, it's all held together probably with bubble gum and wire and mirrors and some other stuff, because again, dealing with Microsoft and provisioning license, all of that's a challenge. PAX8 just makes it look like it's all integrated together, whereas Ingram makes it look like it's 5 different businesses sort of working at odds, right? And so when you get into that client perception, it's not, again, I can buy licenses either way, and I love Ingram, I love PAX8, so it's not necessarily a problem. It's a perception issue though, right? And so when you can pull all that stuff together in a single portal, make that all transparent to a client with your own brand on it, that's integration from a client perspective. No matter if you had to drag and drop and upload some files along the way, the client's not going to perceive that. They're going to perceive that they're dealing with you and your information, and the fact that you've collected it from 10 other sources and made it easy for them to consume, that's what they're going to appreciate. So
absolutely.
I'm still answering a couple questions here, but most of these are going to be internal related to CloudRadial stuff as far as like content production and whatnot. And I guess I'll just answer this, because it kind of relates to all of this, because I get a lot of questions from a lot of people all the time about production of stuff that either helps them sell or just manage their clients. It's something that we've started to do and we can take this offline with really anybody, and audit included, is the production of content to help people get in there. So what we've done in the past with, for example, we did this with Smileback, back when we did a webinar with them. We kind of work with them because obviously there's various facets of knowledge with every single tool out there. And we take some of their stuff and we turned it into maybe courses or KB articles or something like that. So I think to sum it up for you guys that aren't looking at the questions, it's just a question of how do we kind of make all this process more cohesive? How do we leverage the power of MSP's intellectual property, vendor intellectual property, and how do we just make that just a killer client experience? And what I said was, at CloudRadial, we're basically trying to start up a production team to help kind of start that thing in the first place, as far as creating things. Safi, who is a cohort, she's on this call as well. We kind of talked about the ramping up process of all these things. So absolutely, I think we're looking for vendors as much as we are to just pump that in there. So I think related to the integration stuff, related to the content creation stuff, it all is just a matter of working together. Like Frank said, we kind of take this concept of, if you want to call it anything, and maybe like cooperation, right? So where it's like we're still, just because we may or may not overlap does not mean we're all enemies in the space. Far from it, right? A lot of these people, even though we do some stuff, I mean, it is in no one's best interest to just be combative and against each other. So we're all kind of on the same page for that.
Yeah, and I think this space is young. We talked about it, right? It's only a couple of years old. There weren't any of these tools a few years back. And so we're all kind of hitting this from different directions. And now we're at that point of, maybe we're juniors now, right? We're not freshmen anymore, right? So we've learned. And the next logical evolution in this is to figure out ways that we can offer our tools in a collaborative fashion. So you get the best of breed of all of this instead of one person trying to build the whole thing, right? We're trying to make it easier. And the automation side, it certainly comes in the form of tech. It also comes in the form of education and walking a MSP through the steps, like whether it's a wizard or it says, do this, then do this, then do this, right? So there is an education component there that helps keep the MSP on track as well. But yeah, we at Audit are very excited to continue to work with you folks.
That question kind of, put Frank on the spot here, but one of the things that we did that's been really well received is we've got, and I may mess up the name, but Help Desk Habits, which is a training course that's built into the product. It's delivered, on certainly available in the community, or it's delivered with new tenants, that helps train tech staff on how to just communicate with clients better. And one of the things, Frank, that we probably should follow up on after this, because because of these questions, and is to put an audit sales training course, into CloudRadial, so that MSPs are taught from the very moment they start how to get the most out of the industry to land new clients, right? And so, if you're open, we'll try to figure something out there, because I think that's a good way for us to work together, just like we've done. Really appreciate you working with us on this webinar. This has done great. I think there's a lot of good content here, but I really want to see us, further this out, because again, it's the goal, and I think we both share it, which I appreciate, is how do we make MSPs better and get more clients without really having to become different people, right? They just need to be themselves. They need to be smart. They need to be wise. And if they can be client facing, it's just a home run. So,
yeah. And I love the flexibility too, these are tools. You don't have to rip out your RMM, right? Your CRM or all the other things that you use. These are easy to insert. And then we help create that sales process for you to show you, whether it's through automated training or wizards. It's an easy thing to integrate into your MSP, right? It's not the heavy lift. I switched RMM and PSA tools 10 years ago, and it took 6 months. That's a big decision, and sometimes you have to make it. I think it's a lot easier to do that these days than it was back then. But these are the types of tools, even if there was zero integration and we didn't do anything together. Both of these tools are so valuable to an MSP, and we look at it, and you can generate so much in revenue in by using those and selling more easily to your customers and getting new customers, that it'll have a profound impact. And then if we can work together, right, like we propose, and cut back on time, and maybe there's some financial savings, if we come up with some, some promotions together, it's even a bigger home run for those MSPs. And let's face it, we can kind of sort of end where we started. It's all about the end user, right? The SMBs, right? That's who all the MSPs are helping, right? If it wasn't for them, us MSPs, to protect, we wouldn't be in business, right? So this is really all designed to benefit that end customer of the MSP and help them be successful in their businesses.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's attendance today. Again, we've got special offers on our side. Be sure let your I don't know if you want to tell you want to tell MSPs in other cities about this webinar. But we appreciate you for attending today, and look forward to talking to all of you later. So thanks, Frank. And thanks, Mike, who's been patiently standing by.
Yeah, Jeff, can I just add one thing before we
of course.
wrap? Thank you. Great job, guys.
Yeah.
Just wanted to note that anybody who is a non-audit user goes to that to book a demo, you will save $100 off your first month after your trial.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate you hosting us here, and look forward to doing a few more of these in the future. Sounds like we have a lot of content to keep riffing on.
We do. All right. Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Ricky. See you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye now.